Welcome back to Jamin's Daily. Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to have a kind of focused episode, a little deep dive into a topic that I find interesting, some find controversial, but we're going to talk like adults, and it's about firearms. That's right, guns. So I am a gun owner. Millions of people are. And it's an interesting time because, there's riots, there's talk of civil war. And so, now's the time. If you look on the internet for firearms, if you go to a gun store, there's very limited supply. Inventory is low. Lots of, gun sales records are occurring because of, unfortunately, what's going on in the country. Ammo, you cannot find any ammo anywhere if you try to buy ammo. Very little. If there is, you have to pay a lot more for it now. And so that's just where we're at. But I wanted to give you a little bit of a background on how I came into firearms, because I grew up, my father, my family, my parents were not outdoorsmen, and did not own firearms. We never had a gun in the house growing up. We didn't. My dad was a football coach and a golfer, and he just wasn't he was never into guns. Wasn't his deal, hunting or otherwise, even for protection. He just never had one. So, I lived my life as well. Never thought much of it. And it really wasn't until I was about 28 years old. My brother-in-law had recently been married, and one of my brother-in-laws was a soon-to-be retired DEA agent. So he was in law enforcement. He had firearms, and I think one time we went to a ranch, another brother-in-law's kind of ranch in Victoria, or in Edna, Texas. And we were looking to shoot, just have fun. And so he loaned me several firearms to take out there. He showed me how to use them, be safe, etc. So we took a pistol, and we took, I think, a shotgun. And when we got back, he had mentioned that he had a Remington 870 pump action shotgun he wanted to sell. And so I was like, well, hey man, I'm kind of buying. I'm thinking about getting a gun, some kind of firearm. And so then he made it real easy for me. I could pay him in installments and stuff. So this was a private transfer, person to person, private sale, no background check. This is the kind of stuff that now we get into some politics and whether this is good or bad, right? Well, in this situation, I was buying it. The seller was a DEA agent, and so you trust his judgment that he knew me well enough that he felt comfortable enough to sell it to me. Now, later on, we'll talk about I've owned a bunch of firearms that I've sold, and I've never felt comfortable selling them to some stranger on the internet. I always go and sell them to a federal firearms licensed, person or store or something, pawn shops. So that's how I get around, because there is a conscience, some concern that, hey, I just don't want to sell it to some random person. So it makes me feel better. But this particular situation, private sale, had my first shotgun, and it was my first firearm. It was kind of like it's not a toy, obviously. It's a tool, and it needs to be respected. All these different things about gun safety go without being said. But I remember I've used it a couple times to go duck hunting, dove hunting. Great affordable weapon. I think you can buy one for like under $400. Super popular, been around for decades. So my first firearm was a gun that millions of people probably own or have owned. A Remington 870 pump action shotgun. Soon after, and I'm going to put photos of the different firearms up for you to see. Some general ones of this, maybe not because I don't have photos of these anymore. I do have some photos of firearms I currently own that I will put up. But then after that, my wife bought me a a hunting rifle, a bolt action 270, also a Remington 700, like a year later for my birthday. And I had that firearm for a while, pimped it out. I remember that one. At this time too, guys, I'm getting into firearms. So I'm watching YouTube channels all the time, a bunch of gun channels, YouTube channels, learning about different firearms. Everything I know, seriously, and it's not a joke. It's everything I know about guns I've basically learned on YouTube or on the internet. You read, you watch, you can learn so much this way. And so I did. And so I learned how to kind of what you call some gunsmithing. So you take, when the firearm comes, these are mass-produced firearms. It's not a custom rifle, right? So when it gets there, it's fairly accurate out of the box. But there's things you can do to kind of pimp it out, which is what I did. So I took it apart, spray painted the stock, make it look cooler, more tactical, camouflage style. And then I bought this stuff to what they call like a bed, to bed it so that the action fits on the stock better. So I used this epoxy and bedded it and everything, sanded it, and that thing was accurate. Definitely hit a quarter size target at 100 yards consistently. So it was very accurate. I think I was able to take down one feral pig that I have a photo of. Maybe I'll put that one. I don't want to put anything graphic on. But it was one of the coolest pigs. And folks at home, feral pigs are a huge problem in Texas. They're a problem all over the country, really, but a very huge problem here in Texas. They're a huge nuisance. They breed like crazy. There's really, you can't kill enough of them in that regard. After that, so now I'm starting to build on a firearm collection. I remember watching a bunch of YouTube channels of like the top 5 firearms everyone should own. So I was going on that kind of path. Oh, I need to buy these 5 guns first. So my next one was a Ruger 1022. Again, another popular firearm that probably, again, they've sold millions of these. So millions of people have owned this Ruger 1022, lots of fun. Ammo is cheap. It's good for practice. It's fun for younger people who want to shoot without the recoil. It's not as loud as well. So overall, it's a great way just to shoot to what they call plink. Plinking is a term used when you're just shooting at a target or shooting for fun. So I had a Ruger 1022. And soon after that, so now I have my shotgun. I have a bolt action rifle. I have a 1022 rifle. The next thing I needed was a pistol. So I bought my first pistol. Got a Smith & Wesson M&P is the title, kind of the model, right? The make is Smith & Wesson. The model is M&P 9mm. And this is the kind of gun, the barrels come in different lengths, slides different lengths. But for you folks at home, and I'll put a photo of it, but this is it's a duty pistol. So this is kind of what you would see a police officer. That's why it's M&P, stands for military and police. This is something that someone in law enforcement or in the military would have as a sidearm, as their sidearm. Or their service weapon for a police officer or something. This is what the kind of gun they may be carrying. And that was a fun pistol. Every one of these firearms that I had no complaints on. They all worked well. Again, I'm not like some big shooter too, so it wasn't like I was abusing them, putting them a lot of shooting all kinds of rounds and stuff. So they worked well. Finally, I got the 5th. I needed the 5th weapon. That 5th weapon was what can be called a personal defense rifle or an AR-15 style rifle, semi-automatic. So I was buying all these guns from the same guy, the Smith Guns here in Corpus Christi. I bought, other than the shotgun that I bought from my brother-in-law, I bought the other 4 from this guy, and he let you pay it on layaway, and he was nice enough, So going to his store, and one day he had this one in there, this Bushmaster AR-15, and this one was a budget. It was because back then you could spend, and even now you can spend a ridiculous amount of money, well over $1,500 on an AR. This one was more of a budget, but even then, I think I still ended up spending about almost $900 for it. And the particular thing about this one is it came with the red dot, so it came with the sight, and it was the carbon AR-15. So it was kind of ahead of its time because the trend has shifted. Back then, this is in 2012, maybe 2013. The trend was more metal, heavier, long, rail systems. That's what people liked. And those types of guns do feel nicer and heavier, but now you start seeing more of the adoption of carbon fiber because they want to make the rifles lighter. So, this gun was like a little bit ahead of its time, and it was fun as well. It was real light, had a pencil barrel, so the barrel profile was thin, which makes it get hotter faster, but again, makes it, so all these things are give and takes. What kind of purpose are you serving with this rifle? So this rifle is really meant to be like, duty, kind of like a reconnaissance. You're moving, you're on the move. You don't want to be carrying this heavy rifle the whole time, right? So this was kind of, would be the rifle for you. And I liked it. I also spray painted it. I'm going to try to see if I can find some photos, because I did have photos of this firearm at one point, but they were like on old phones that I just then since sold and didn't transfer the photos over. So I'm sorry, folks. I'm sorry. And the thing about when I first got those first 5 firearms, again, this is from 2012 to 14. So President Obama was in office, and there was always this fear that they were going to pass. And during this time, there was several different mass shootings, specifically the Sandy Hook, where they murdered young children. So there was always this concern that they would pass some kind of legislation banning some of these types of weapons. And so that was always playing in the back of my mind as well. Politically, is like, well, maybe I should also try to get these now before they're not available. People do that. And so I did as well. And so then moving on, now I had the firearms I wanted, but then I'm just like firearms, it's a hobby. The cool thing about it as well too is that unlike other hobbies that you enjoy, you spend money, it's just gone, right? Sometimes you don't have anything to show for it, right? After it's done. Whereas with firearms, the cool thing is they're durable goods, so you can always resell them. They hold their value fairly well. So I've done that. Every one of the first 5 that I just mentioned to you, I don't even have anymore. I sold. And almost every single time I sold a firearm, I ended up selling it so I can buy something else, another firearm. One firearm that I currently own, I actually previously owned it, sold it, and then I bought it again. But let's talk about one firearm that I actually had that I sold because it was just a piece of crap. It didn't work out. It was a budget. Again, I'm trying to grow my collection at this point. So I find this gun on Bud's Gun Shop, where I've bought a bunch of other guns now because they have the best prices. And in some cases, they have as long as a 6-month layaway. If you go on there now, there is no more 6-month layaway, and they're limited supply. It's such a shame. But I used to spend, time just scrolling in there, looking at all, what I would like. Well, my wife used to do the same thing, but she's looking at purses and clothes. I'm doing the same thing, but I'm looking at firearms, right? So I bought this gun, this pistol, made by the manufacturer is FMK, small American manufacturer, trying to get into the market. They had a model called the 9C. This was supposed to be the Generation 2, the Gen 2. And it was, I want to say $360 plus tax, then the layaway fees and stuff. So I probably spent like $400 on this pistol. And it was a compact, similar to the M&P, but a little smaller. And it felt good. I think I had it for a week or two before I ever shot it. So I was racking it, dry firing. I thought it was all going to be great. Go to the range, shoot it. And nothing but problems. When it would discharge and the slide would go back, when it was coming back, I think what they call into battery, when the slide was coming back in, it wouldn't come all the way, right? Which would lead to misfires. And there's there could be some reasons, what they call limp wrist. If you're not holding it tight enough, you can cause that. But I shot it probably a couple hundred rounds. And other people say, hey, listen, you got to put a bunch of firearm rounds into it to kind of work it out. Listen, that's not my opinion on firearms. The firearm should work the moment you get it. Okay? When you shoot it, it should work. And if you're having problems with it, unless it's some kind of custom $3,000 1911 that, there is a breaking in process, then no. That's the only reason. But if it's some budget 400 polymer pistol that's having problems out the gate, I guarantee you when you buy a Glock, that doesn't happen. Okay? So I sold it pretty quickly. I took about $150 loss on that one. But really, out of all the firearms, that's the only one that really was a dud, because soon I moved on. And so those the five first firearms that I had, I went and sold almost all of them at the same time to get a couple things. One was this compact. It's a subcompact 9mm pistol by Springfield Armory that I've since pimped out, customized the slide. When you see a photo of it, it looks pretty sweet. And I purchased that one. That one was like $600. And then when I did the slide and everything, so it was about $800, $900 into this pistol. And I needed the money. So I sold all those other guns. I was able to buy that. And I was able to buy, or at least submit the paperwork and pay for a suppressor. This is like in maybe the winter of 2014, maybe 15. I think it was 14. And so, and that's a whole process that you have to go through, and then you wait months and months. Mine took a whole 6 months. I didn't get it until like June the next year. The suppressor, which we'll go over. I have it on a current firearm that I use. Another pistol that I have now. So what I currently have is the Springfield, the subcompact. Then I have a Stoeger STR9, which is kind of a budget gun as well. But I saw a lot of YouTube videos that people liked it, and so I bought it again on a 6-month layaway. It was probably only $400. And I had a bunch of when I received the firearm and I took it to the range. Prior to taking it to the range, this gun, because it was cheap, I decided I wanted to try to do some gunsmithing, some custom work on the slide myself. So I put it in an acid bath to try to take off some of the coating on the slide to give it this different appearance. And you'll see. I'll show you a photo. I don't know if that caused any problems, but put it back together. Thought I did a great job. Finally take it to the range, shoot it, and I didn't even get a single magazine through when the trigger, something happened. There was some kind of malfunction, and I couldn't even rack the slide. It just got stuck, froze. I had to send it back to Stoeger. And one thing I will say is that process was great. They gave me the mailing label, sent it to them, didn't have to pay for it. They only had it for less than 2 weeks, and they sent it back. Okay, so I get it back, take it to the gun range again. This time I'm shooting it. Hey, everything's great. Come back, bring it back to the office. Days later, I decide to take it out and clean it, And as I'm cleaning it and I'm disassembling it, there's this little indentation on the slide. I'm sure there's a name, but it's it allows, it's the takedown pin that allows to take the slide and holds it in. Anyways, it broke. It's probably a $1 piece of polymer plastic that broke, right? That's why these guns are some of these are cheap parts. So then I send it again, and again they get it back to me within 2 weeks. At this point, I didn't want to take the loss and just sell it. Plus, I'd done all this work to it. It doesn't look like the regular gun, so I didn't know if they were going to give me a good price on it. But since then, it's worked really well. So 2 times I had to send it back to the manufacturer. But now, arguably, it's my favorite pistol because it just fits in my hand great, and I shoot it really well. I also have a long slide pistol, which is a FN Hurst style. Foreign, think they're either German or Austrian firearm maker. Bought this one. You'll see a photo of this one. It's a beautiful looking gun. It's got a longer barrel, so you're supposed to be more accurate with it. This is really kind of like my bedstand. You know, the nightstand kind of. We're having one of those biometric safes, so safe and secure because I have children at home. That's the other thing, folks. A little bit about gun safety here is, you got to be very careful about your firearms. The thing about a firearm is that ultimately, if you have a firearm for protection, it's not protecting anybody if it's locked up in a safe, unloaded, because you really don't have time in an emergency to run to the safe, unlock the safe, load the gun. That's not realistic, folks. Okay, so you should have a loaded weapon in some kind of biometric safe that you can open immediately. You just put your hand on it. It opens. Then you got it. Okay? But they do need to be locked up. And one of the great things, too, because I have young children. And one of the other things I do is, one, I don't keep, none of them are loaded. But there's such thing as what they call Israeli carry, in which there's not a round in the chamber. And people will tell you, like, if your carry weapon, if you do concealed carry, that you shouldn't carry it that way because, in some kind of situation, tenths of seconds matter, right? So that time you take to draw your weapon, rack it, and then, that's precious time. But the reason why, and I could be getting this wrong, folks at home, if you know more about this, definitely send me an email at jaminsdaily@gmail.com. But I think the rumor, the folklore behind the Israeli carry is that because the Israelis were carrying their sidearms and they would constantly they were in fear of, random people, whether they're citizens or they're somebody coming up and pulling, trying to take their service weapon when they're not taking, and then using it on them or things like that. So it was just an extra precaution, which I slightly recommend. So there, that the FN long slide, that's a pistol now that I'm not done with. I definitely want to put in a new trigger. I think I want to also Cerakote the slide, maybe even the barrel. So y'all see, that one's a work in progress. I think what I've decided too is I'm not going to spend any more money on new firearms, especially now, because who knows what's going on. But I'm just going to work on pimping out the ones I have, and then getting cooler gear for them, etc. Maybe we'll do another episode about gear relating to the firearms themselves. So now, during this time, I also bought an AK-47 pistol with the brace, and I had it for maybe 6 months, and then I sold it for Christmas money. But moving along, I have 2 AR-15s from a company called Palmetto State Armory. They are one of the best manufacturers in the country. They've really changed the game because they've continuously improved upon the budget rifle, to where it's only budget because The nicer ones, the so-called nicer, better ones, are just, in many cases, some of them are just overpriced. You're just paying more for the name. The quality is great, but the thing is, the PSA, the Palmetto State, the quality is great too. Excuse me. All kinds of videos on the internet, torture tests, reviewing them against other rifles that cost almost twice as much, and they hold their own. So I own a AR-15 pistol that I have a brace on, 5.56, your normal, what most people would think of as it's a black scary rifle. When I put it on here, you might get scared, folks. It might give you a nightmare. It's a black scary rifle that is the really the personal defense. That's one of the go-tos if you ever the Russians are invading. All right. The other one is also, and that one's a pistol. It's a 10.5-inch barrel, folks. Which I'm going to tell you now is that I don't know what law it was, but they passed a law many years ago, in which the barrels on rifles have to be a certain length. And if they're not, then it's against the law. You have to get a particular stamp through the ATF and stuff. So the way that it's legal is that you have these rifles. They're not rifles at all, because it has to be 16 inches. So if it's only 10.5, it's not a rifle. It's an AR-15 pistol that I have a brace on. You'll see. Okay, folks, Google it if you're interested. So I have the same thing with another AR-15, but it's chambered. The kind of ammo is different. It's chambered in a round called 6.5 Grendel. And the barrel on that one is 12 inches. It's a little longer, because this round is really meant, it really should have a 24. I have another rifle in this cartridge that's a bolt action, because it's really meant for distance. You want a longer barrel. But I digress. So the 6.5 Grendel AR-15 that I have the suppressor. So the suppressor that I bought, I have it on this firearm, and it is a sweet setup. When I put the photo on there, this is one of the cool, when I was, the way I can imagine is like having rims on a car, okay, having some sweet 24s on your Tahoe or something. It just, I've dressed it up. It looks sweet. It's my favorite firearm. You can shoot. It's accurate. It's fun to shoot. You could, a 12-year-old girl could shoot this rifle and be comfortable. There's not hardly any recoil. So I told you, so I have a bolt action in the same cartridge with a 20-inch barrel, and this is more of like what you would think of like maybe a sniper. This is really a hunting rifle, the hunting rifle that I have now since I sold the other one. So if somebody did invite me to go deer hunting or something, this is the rifle I would take, most likely. I could take the AR 6.5, but that would be more, I'd have to be 100 yards. Just depends on the distance. This other one, though, it's a Hoya 1500, and it's got this sweet, what they call a chassis. So the rifle, the action and the barrel is put onto this, what people know as the stock. But instead of calling it a stock, they call it a chassis. It's all marketing. It's a stock, but it's a chassis. It's really sweet. You'll see some photos on that one. Finally, folks, lastly, and perhaps the most common, durable, this firearm has won revolutions all over the world. This firearm is the favorite of not every militia in Africa, jihadists in the Middle East. Okay, it is arguably the most popular firearm in the world, the AK-47. So I have a Century International imported Century Arms Draco AK-47 pistol. Now the cool thing about the Draco is that it's a favorite among studio gangsters and rappers. Okay, so they like to rap about their Draco, and in many cases their Draco, they buy it as the pistol, and if you try to shoot a Draco in its pistol form, you're not going to be accurate at all. It's a novelty at that point. It's like a Rambo shoot from the hip, pop, 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 kind of firearm. But your host has pimped his out with a brace. Perhaps there's reviews on different types of braces that you can put on firearms. This one is one of the best ones you can get, folks. The price, I think the brace alone was like $200. You'll see. So, and it folds. So it's a folding brace. It fits in some kind of carry case when you're trying to go to the range. It's really nice, really nice. And if anyone is interested in particular, wants any more in depth on any one of the firearms we've discussed more in depth, or you have a question, send me an email. I'd gladly love to talk about it a little bit. And the thing is, what's funny is the hobby that I had in firearms and the skill that I was learning too, because I felt like, hey, I need to learn how to use a weapon and shoot and learn how to operate it safely, etc., etc. That was also one of the things in my mind as I'm learning this hobby, sport, etc., skill, is that I haven't had any time for it in the last 2 months because of work and the podcast. Mainly the podcast. The podcast is my new hobby. I spend all my extra time doing the podcast instead of messing around with firearms. And the thing is, it saved me a lot of money because it's expensive. Firearms are, and ammo. This is doing the podcast a little cheaper now. So, anyways, hope you enjoyed this episode. I think you know where I stand since I have all these firearms when it comes to the Second Amendment, things like that. Listen, like they said, if you look into the Constitution, firearms are not about hunting. Okay? Second Amendment has nothing to do with hunting. It has to do with free people having the ability to own firearms. And so there's all kinds of comments. We can go left and right on this. We're going to go above. We're just going to go over it. Thanks for joining us, folks. Jamin's Daily, remember, is brought to you by Sage Choice Insurance Agency. You can reach us at 361-400-2411. You can go to quotefromjamin.com and get a quote, submit some data to us, encrypted, secure. We get that information, we send you a quote. Super easy. Jamin's Daily. Thanks again for joining us. Stick with us because the best is yet to come.